I know what many of you are thinking, and you are warming up your fingers for the comment section to let me know. ABSA, there are laws that exist to protect children and make sure that they receive an adequate education. So people will just sue. Students will sue. Families will sue. Special interest groups will sue on behalf of children. Maybe teachers' unions will sue states. Maybe they'll all work together to sue the federal government. Hear me now. Hear me early. Hear me often. The federal government will be ungovernable by the courts. It is all but a guarantee that under the new presidential administration, the Department of Education will be dismantled or significantly defunded in the 2025 federal budget process by a party that has believed for decades that access to an education, and specifically healthy and affordable food, is not a human right, even for children, and that the experience of hunger is a motivator for children to do well in school in order to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and change their lives. Beyond the partisan discourse, this shift will have tangible impacts on American children, particularly in predominantly white, lower-income areas. The latest conservative talking point to justify dismantling or defunding the Department of Education suggests that the federal government forces states to teach certain subjects. But the reality is there is no national curriculum on any core subject in K-12 education in the United States, and the role of the Department of Education is not to meddle in curriculum or decide what subjects and details are or are not taught. That has always been up to the states. In reality, the Department of Education provides essential funding to local schools through programs such as Title I, which supports schools with high numbers of low-income students. In 2023, the department allocated $79.6 billion for K-12 education, primarily for special education and assistance to disadvantaged students. The Department of Education, established as a cabinet-level agency in 1979, grew from a decades-long federal commitment to addressing education inequity. Initially, education was almost entirely the responsibility of state and local governments, which led to significant disparities in educational access and quality across regions. In response, the federal government began to intervene with funding and guidelines to support public schools, particularly those in low-income areas. The department's primary purpose became to distribute federal funds, promote equal access, and uphold educational standards to ensure every child, regardless of background, receives a baseline quality of education. Now, you know how it is we do here, so bear with me for a second while I put y'all on game. The Department of Education distributes funds through a series of federal titles under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, each with a specific purpose to enhance the educational landscape. These programs are fundamental for school districts across the nation, for students in kindergarten through high school, supporting underfunded areas and ensuring students have access to necessary resources. Here are some examples. Title I provides financial assistance to schools serving high numbers of low-income students. The goal is to ensure these students meet state academic standards. Title I funds help schools hire additional staff, offer extended learning opportunities, and provide supplemental educational resources. Title II funding focuses on enhancing the quality of teaching and school leadership. Recognizing that effective educators are key to student success, Title II funds training, recruitment, and ongoing development for teachers and principals. Schools rely on this funding to maintain high standards of teaching, which directly benefits students' learning experiences and outcomes. Title III provides support to help these students achieve English proficiency while meeting academic standards. Title IV funds are dedicated to creating well-rounded educational experiences that extend beyond core academics. It supports programs in areas such as arts, music, physical education, mental health, and school safety. Title IV funding also addresses technological needs, giving students access to digital tools necessary for modern learning. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act provides funding to support special education services, ensuring students with disabilities receive free and appropriate public education. IDEA funds help schools meet federal mandates to provide accommodations and individualized instruction. For schools, particularly those in low-income areas, IDEA funding is essential to serving these students equitably, as specialized resources and support is costly without federal assistance. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, known as the USDA, also plays a crucial role in supporting student health and education. The USDA's Food and Nutrition Service administers the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program, which provide free or reduced price meals to millions of students. The USDA's involvement in schools highlights the connection between nutrition, learning, and health. For low-income families, these programs relieve financial strain and support child development. In 2024, students in predominantly white, low-income areas, such as Macomb County, Michigan, where current minimum wage is just over $10, or Erie County, Pennsylvania, where the minimum wage is just over $7, and Kenosha County, Wisconsin, where it's much the same, the minimum wage just over $7. Places like these benefit significantly from these nutrition programs, helping stave off food insecurity and its many harmful impacts. Let's take a moment to look at the potential impacts on the largest school districts in these areas. The Utica Community School District is Michigan's second largest school district, serving approximately 27,000 students. The district's student population is predominantly white. In the last budget cycle, UCS received nearly $29.4 million in federal funding. This amount includes allocations from Title I funds, supporting schools with higher numbers of low-income students, IDEA grants ensuring services for students with disabilities, and Title III funds, assisting English language learners in reaching language proficiency. If these funds were cut, the Utica Community Schools would likely face substantial program reductions, directly affecting services for low-income, special education, and English language learner students. For instance, without IDEA funding, meeting federal mandates for special education could become financially impossible, affecting both the quality of support and legal compliance. The Erie City School District in Erie County, Pennsylvania, serves around 10,500 students. Its demographic composition is diverse, though predominantly white. Federal support is critical to maintaining equitable education here, as the district receives substantial federal funds. A loss of this funding would directly impact Erie's ability to maintain these programs, potentially limiting access to vocational and advanced education opportunities. Erie City School District's dependence on these funds makes it particularly vulnerable to cuts, especially for students needing extra academic or vocational support. Serving roughly 21,000 students, the Kenosha Unified School District in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, is composed of about 47% white students and 28% Hispanic or Latino. In the 2022-2023 fiscal year, this district received approximately $20 million in federal funds, which include, yes, Title I funding for low-income students, Title II funding for teacher professional development, which is critical in a district with constrained teacher resources, and IDEA funds, which support specialized education services for students with disabilities. A funding loss would lead to cuts in specialized support services, disproportionately affecting students with disabilities and those from low-income families. Additionally, reductions in Title II funding would decrease the district's capacity to offer professional development for educators, impacting the quality of teaching and, ultimately, student success. Those districts are relatively small to moderately sized, so let's zoom out for a bigger impact. Recently, in a televised interview, Rick Scott, a Republican senator from Florida, lamented the existence of the Department of Education, suggesting the department is responsible for choosing what is taught in the states. He further went on to ask, why does such a department exist in the federal government? What exactly does the Department of Education do? These must have been rhetorical questions because Senator Scott used to be Governor Scott from 2011 to 2019. He very well knows that without federal funding, public education in Florida would go bankrupt, unable to cover the costs of educating the state's children. Take the Miami-Dade County Public School District in Florida, the largest district in the state with a majority Latino student population. In the most recent budget year, Miami-Dade County Public Schools received substantial federal funding from the U.S. Department of Education. This funding includes allocations from various programs such as Title I grants, IDEA funds for special education, and Title III funds for English language learners. In 2022, the district was allocated approximately $1 billion in federal stimulus funds through the elementary and secondary school emergency relief programs. Likewise, the Houston Independent School District, the largest in Texas, with roughly 73% Latino student population, receives massive amounts of education funding from the federal government, around $29 million annually from the Department of Education alone. The Houston Independent School District received substantial funding through the elementary and secondary school emergency relief programs to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In total, Houston funding amounted to approximately $1.2 billion. These funds have been instrumental in supporting various initiatives, including addressing learning loss, enhancing educational technology, and ensuring safe school operations during the pandemic. I know what many of you are thinking, and you are warming up your fingers for the comment section to let me know. ABSA, there are laws that exist to protect children and make sure that they receive an adequate education. So people will just sue. Students will sue. Families will sue. Special interest groups will sue on behalf of children. Maybe teachers' unions will sue states. Maybe they'll all work together to sue the federal government. Hear me now. Hear me early. Hear me often. The federal government will be ungovernable by the courts. There are many laws currently in place to guarantee a child's right to public education and to federally protected support services and dollars that help guarantee no child is left behind. However, the system allows for workarounds. For example, districts that can no longer afford to provide special education services as a result of the defunding or dismantling of the Department of Education can apply for a waiver to the federal government, and under the new administration, those waivers will be granted, making legal challenges to protect student rights largely moot. Further, we should expect and get used to the idea that where the people prevail in the courts, the administration will not abide lawful orders of compliance. With reduced access to quality education, students in underfunded areas will lack the skills and knowledge necessary for the modern workforce, potentially limiting job prospects and socioeconomic mobility. Federal support provides opportunities for students from low-income backgrounds to succeed. Without this support, the divide between the affluent and lower-income white communities would likely deepen, limiting upward mobility for students in areas like Macomb and Kenosha counties. Without nutrition programs, malnutrition will lead to higher rates of health issues, from obesity to cognitive impairments. Poor health will affect every aspect of life, creating obstacles to personal and academic success. In the absence of federal support, communities will attempt to self-fund education and nutrition programs, which could lead to higher taxes and strain local resources. This will create challenges for predominantly white areas that lack strong local economies. As public education resources become scarce, states will work with the federal government to justify new methodologies for deciding which children will have access to a free public education. The first to be struck from the list will be immigrants, especially anyone who is undocumented or who has one or more parent who is undocumented, effectively eliminating one of the major draws that brings people to the United States legally or illegally, the promise of an education. The defunding of the Department of Education and Department of Agriculture's nutrition programs would reshape the landscape of American education, particularly for predominantly white, Latino, and low-income communities. As federal support diminishes, the impacts on education quality, health, and economic mobility will be severe, altering the future for white and other children in these areas. Federal programs were designed to create equal opportunities for all students. Today, without them, the nation risks a return to deep inequities and a generation of students unprepared for the challenges of life as adults and members of society tomorrow.